Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday night. Hey, Stephanie, how are you doing? Stephanie says hello to everyone. Kay says hi, all. Hi, Kay. Susan says hello. Dale says good evening, all. Hiya, Dale. Nice to see you. Thanks, all of you, for coming. Please. Oh, hi, Susan. How are you doing tonight? So please share as much as you can. Susan said spend all afternoon canvassing for AnnaCallahan.com. She's fighting for transparency and good governance in our Massachusetts State House so we can hold our reps accountable. And she knows MMT. She sounds great. And when is she going to run for Congress? But the State House is important too. It's a good place to start. So, I was thinking about what was coming out in the news when I was thinking about this show, and I could help but notice something really very simple that tends to unite a number of the pieces of news that I've been seeing. So let's start by sharing a piece. That appeared in Common Dreams. On August 26th. Okay, this is about the CDC's change in policy. Quote, this change in policy will kill, unquote. Scientists and medical experts warn of dangerous loosening in CDC's COVID guidelines. This article was done by Lisa Newcomb, I think a fairly new staff writer over at Common Dreams. There's a picture of Dr. Redfield, who's the director of the CDC. Picture of him preparing to testify during a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on the plan to research, manufacture, and distribute a coronavirus vaccine. And there he is. Pretty good close-up of him putting on his mask. As the number of COVID-19 cases in the United States nears 6 million, and with more than 176,000 Americans dead from the virus, according to the Worldometer site, that number right now is more like 184,796 fatalities, but I'm pretty sure that was yesterday. Hang on a second, let me refresh this. Just get that figure for fatalities right. It's important. So yesterday, up to this point, it's 9 o'clock at night, so yesterday is really today. In fact, do I have it on yesterday or do I have it on today? No, it's now. Okay. According to the Worldometer site, We were at 186,855 fatalities, and we lost another 954 people today thus far. As for yesterday, we were at 1105, and we ended the day at 185,901 fatalities. So, you'll notice that in deaths per million, we're now at 564, whereas Brazil is at 566. They've caught up to us now, and they're ahead of us by 2. Both we and they, however, are closing in on Sweden, where the deaths per million have been pretty flat of late. And I think Chile, which has been going up fairly rapidly as well, I think we're now starting to catch up to Chile, and Brazil is also. We're only 10 deaths per million behind. Oh no, I'm mistaken. We're 20 deaths behind Chile, which means we haven't been catching up to them. They've been matching our pace in very rough terms. Okay. They've gone past Sweden now. They're at 584 deaths per million. And both Chile, Chile, Brazil, and ourselves are all rapidly now catching up, not simply to Sweden, but we're only 23 away from Italy now. So we've been moving up the deaths per million chart, which is the bottom line here, really pretty fast. Now, there are recent serious outbreaks in Spain and France, but Spain is still not going up in fatalities anywhere near as rapidly as we are. And France, France had only 6 fatalities yesterday, or actually today, only 6 fatalities. Cases have been going up rather rapidly in France of late. But paradoxically, deaths have not been going up as rapidly. Well, let me go on with the article now. Hopefully I'm still sharing it. Yes, I am. So, with more than 176,000 Americans dead, yes, now more than 186,000. From the coronavirus, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has quietly altered its coronavirus guidelines, worrying public health experts and raising suspicions among healthcare advocates that the moves are politically motivated. And there's a quote from Chuck Idelson of National Nurses by United, who wrote on his personal Twitter account Tuesday night, quote, "This is a stunning betrayal of public health that will spread the pandemic and lead to more unnecessary deaths," unquote. He was referring to the CDC's newest guideline that not all individuals potentially exposed to COVID-19 should be tested. Idelson said the move offered, quote, "clear evidence of how Trump has destroyed every public agency that is supposed to carry out the public interest rather than hucksterism for his cult." So there it is. And Alison Galvani tweeted, the CDC just revised their testing guidance to exclude people without symptoms. Our work on the, quote, silent, unquote, spread underscores the importance of testing people who have been exposed to COVID-19 regardless of symptoms. This change in policy will kill. And it will, of course, because people who have the disease but are asymptomatic are very good spreaders of the disease, whether those people are children, okay, or adults. So this is not a good look for the CDC. On Friday, the CDC released new guidelines for travelers advising you may have been exposed to COVID-19 on your travels. You may feel well and not have any symptoms, but you can be contagious without symptoms and spread the virus to others. You and your travel companions, including children, pose a risk to your family, friends, and community for 14 days after you were exposed to the virus. And that may be optimistic. It may be longer than that. It may be as long as 20 days. The agency had previously urged international travelers and those traveling from areas within the U.S. with high COVID-19 infection rates to self-quarantine for 14 days. Many states currently have their own recommendations for out-of-state visitors, including a 14-day self-quarantine on arrival in the state. On Monday, the CDC released guidance for business owners and employees regarding customers who refuse to wear masks in a given establishment. They wrote, quote, don't argue with a customer if they make threats or become violent. If needed, go to a safe area. Ideally, a room that locks from the inside and has a second exit route and has a phone or silent alarm. Wow. Unquote. And, quote, don't attempt to force anyone who appears upset or violent to follow COVID-19 prevention policies or other policies or practices related to COVID-19. For example, to limit them on number of households or food products. The guidance comes as retail workers, restaurant workers, and other frontline employees continue to be threatened by people who are refusing to comply with COVID-19 social distancing measures, including wearing masks. Dr. Tom Frieden tweeted, two unexplained, inexplicable, probably indefensible changes likely imposed on CDC's website. Asterisk, damn it, if you come from a place with lots of COVID, quarantine for 14 days. If you're a contact, get tested. If plus, we can trace your contacts and stop chains of spread. A sad day, said Dr. Frieden. But the guideline change that has created the most controversy so far concerns testing for COVID-19 in asymptomatic individuals. The new CDC recommendations, also released on Monday, contradict what the agency and its director, Dr. Redfield, have been saying for weeks. And Redfield told ABC News in July, quote, anyone who thinks they may be infected, independent of symptoms, should get a test, unquote. But the new recommendations don't go that far. Instead, they read, quote, if you have been in close contact within 6 feet of a person with COVID-19 infection for at least 15 minutes, but do not have symptoms, you do not necessarily need a test unless you are a vulnerable individual or your healthcare provider or state or local public health officials actually recommend that you take one. So there are a number of very negative comments about the change. The New York Times reported, quote, by the CDC's own estimates, roughly 40% of people infected with the coronavirus may never go on to develop symptoms, remaining asymptomatic for the duration of their tenure with the virus. And a mathematician and infectious diseases modeler at the University of Colorado in Boulder, whose name is Dan Larimore, said, quote, I think it's bizarre. Any move right now to reduce the levels of testing by changing guidelines is a step in the wrong direction. Of course, of watchdogs, scientists, and doctors agree and are sounding the alarm on social media. And the chorus is quoted in the article. Of course, I think everybody suspects that this is due to pressure from Trump. And that what's going on here is an attempt to put the recovery of the economy, that is, the protection of the property of the people who run the economy, to put that ahead of the lives of the people themselves. An HHS spokesperson told the Times, quote, testing capacity is massively expanded, and we are not utilizing the full capacity that we developed. We revised the guidance to reflect current evidence and the best public health interventions, which is to say absolutely nothing. There's no detail on that. We have no way of evaluating whether they did revise the guidance in light of current evidence and the best public health interventions. And Dr. Krutika Kupali, an infectious disease physician in Palo Alto, told the Times, quote, I feel this is going to make things worse, unquote. Quote again, if people are getting exposed and they're not getting tested and they're not isolating, that's a huge problem, she said. And again, going back to Alison Galvani's tweet, she's the director of the Center for Infectious Disease Modeling and Analysis, and she's a professor of epidemiology at Yale University. She put up concerns more bluntly, quote, this change in policy will kill, unquote. Clearly, in her opinion, property is being put before people in this case. So yet another case, I'm going to share the screen again, is brought to us in a column in the American Prospect. Headline is, the professors speak out about college reopenings amid coronavirus. This one is written by Mike Sionato on August 28th, 2020. He occasionally writes for the Prospect. I don't believe he's a regular columnist as yet, though he's very good, and he might soon become one if he's not already a regular columnist. There's a picture with a little sign in it saying, "Don't go viral." It's a sign encouraging wearing a mask as students move into dormitories during the coronavirus pandemic at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. This was taken on August 18, 2020. So universities and colleges are beginning to reopen for some in-person classes around the U.S., despite fears and concerns from students, professors, and staff about the risks of doing so. In the University of Florida in Gainesville, one of the largest single-site college campuses in the United States, with around 54,000 enrolled students, is set to begin in-person classes on August 31st. There's no requirement to be tested for students. They take their temperature and fill out a questionnaire, which asks if they've been exposed, which is purely voluntary, unquote. Said Steve Kern, a retired business professor and current acting chair of the United Faculty of Florida UF, which is called on colleges and universities in Florida to transition to remote learning for the fall. Kern also noted that the school's coronavirus tracking system doesn't date reported cases, but only the total since the pandemic began. And one Paul Ortiz, who's the UF president and professor of history at the University of Florida, he says, quote, "We're very concerned with the high infection rates, the limited classroom capacity, and making sure that everyone is as safe as possible. This is why we've advocated for 100% remote learning. We realize we're not likely to get that, but we're not going to push as hard as we can because we feel people's lives are at stake." And quote again, "We have over 50,000 students in a town of just over 100,000 people. I get calls and emails every day from people in surrounding neighborhoods worried about the reopening and the impact it will have on the community." And here's more from Mike Cianato. The UF spokesperson said in an email that the school has instituted police party patrols to prevent large gatherings, issued a mandate to wear masks for students and faculty, and is conducting contact tracing and testing on campus. Students may face sanctions or disciplinary measures for noncompliance. In July 2020, the Trump administration pressured colleges and universities to reopen in the fall. Since the reopenings began this month, several schools have already shut down or changed their plans in response to outbreaks. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, shut down the campus in response to outbreaks after its first week of reopening. At Notre Dame, suspended in-person classes for 2 weeks after initially reopening. Michigan State reversed course to full online learning after reports of outbreaks at other universities. After rising cases on campus, Butler University, Indiana, ordered students to shelter in place and conduct classes online for 2 weeks. Other outbreaks have been reported at Georgia Tech, University of Alabama, University of Dayton, University of Miami, and Radford University, North Carolina State University, and several other campuses. Critics have charged that some campuses pushed to reopen to ensure they would get student tuition for the fall semester. Students have subsequently demanded tuition cuts after classes went online. And as other universities and colleges began to reopen campuses in the coming weeks, the professors have been protesting their schools' reopening plans, frustrated with the lack of safety protections and support for online teaching. Quote, Onondaga County has a 0.6% infection rate. Onondaga County okay, is in New York State. We've been very lucky, and the question is, what's this moving petri dish of students going to do? That's a real concern to us, unquote, said Deborah Pello, an anthropology professor at Syracuse University. Quote, if only they bothered to ask us what we thought, and if only, frankly, more energy had been put into organizing virtual classes for the faculty. Syracuse resumed classes for the fall on August 24th and has already had issues with student parties, suspending 23 students for participating. Videos and photos of college students around the U.S. failing to follow coronavirus safety protocols, such as wearing a mask and social distancing, are increasingly common. Quote, no one is safe until there is an effective and widespread use of a vaccine. So all the things put in place, nothing will prevent the spread of the virus among young people who are not taking the virus seriously, said Arlene Cantor, professor of law at Syracuse. Quote, given the fact we have students coming back, I wasn't surprised there was a gathering of students. I won't be surprised if there are future gatherings of students, unquote. A spokesman from Syracuse University shared a statement from the school's vice chancellor and provost, John Liu, who claimed that more than 30 faculty members were involved on subcommittees for reopening plans, and several online engagement sessions with faculty were held over the summer. But the University of Kansas resumed in-person classes on August 24th, despite some protests from faculty and students calling for the school to conduct classes entirely online for the fall. Contact tracing at the school is voluntary. Much of the responsibility in adhering to coronavirus protections is left up to students to take actions themselves. After a time of declaring that public health would be the guiding principle of policy, the University of Kansas administration added that the return of students to in-person classes was equally vital, said Dave Radiger, history professor at the University of Kansas. Quote, the latter priority was based on extravagant overreading of evidence regarding the students' desires. It led to rosy assumptions about how masks, plus an inadequate app, could prevent the spread of COVID, and about students by uniformly making healthy choices. At the College of William & Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, as on-campus classes resumed on August 19th, the Dean of Students sent out a campus-wide email on August 21st outlining a zero-tolerance policy for violating coronavirus protocols, telling students not to be the reason the school shuts down and fires or furloughs workers. Quote, the students, staff, grad students, and faculty didn't decide to open the campus. It's the administration who decided to open the campus. If it's not safe to open the campus, don't open the campus, said Jasper Connor, a PhD student and spokesperson for the William & Mary Workers Union. Quote again, we could be educating people at home and not transporting people from around the U.S. But instead, we're putting a lot of people's lives at risk. Then they're blaming the youngest around for any sort of outbreak that happens. There could be no parties, no violations, and the virus could still spread, unquote. And a spokesperson for William & Mary said in an email, quote, our goal in offering an in-person learning experience this fall is to ensure that we provide a range of equitable educational opportunities for all of our students. And professors at Kutztown University, never heard of that place, in Pennsylvania, protested campus reopening on August 20th outside the school president's home in masks. Quote, they wanted to make clear that if it doesn't work, the consequences could be severe, unquote, said Tom Stewart, chapter president of the faculty union on campus, quote again. Even with all the protocols at schools like Notre Dame, Kean University of North Carolina, there have still been outbreaks because there are so many factors you can't control. So again, the schools, of course, want to stay in business. They need money to stay in business and to pay the faculty and to pay the staff they keep on. And so they were motivated to open up, whether it was safe or not. They were putting property over the lives of their faculty, their staff, okay, and their students. That's what managers in our society often do. Their first loyalty is to the business that they're conducting, whether that business is a private business or whether it's a university or school, even one that's run by the state. But certainly universities that are private have great pressure to open up. And the pressure has been made much more serious by the fact that we haven't had another round of coronavirus relief legislation. Nothing significant anyway, since the CARES Act. We need a safety net for people so they can stay home if they need to stay home. Congress has not moved. Why not? Because Congress values property over people. So let's look at the next case. It's an article from, I believe, William Rivers Pitt. It is from Truth Out. Let me find it. There it is. I'll give you the full view of the article and get out of the picture for a little while. You'll still be able to hear my voice, though. The title of the article is GOP Convention Pretended COVID Was Over While Creating Super Spreader Conditions. It certainly did, much more so than the Democratic convention did. This, of course, is the night of Trump's official acceptance speech. And this is in front of the White House. People sitting in seating that is not socially distant, often unmasked. People of all ages. People who, from the looks of the back of their heads, look to be maybe in their 60s, maybe be in their 70s, taking really extreme risks, close to other people for much more than 15 minutes. And people did not appear to be masked in that crowd. It's an article by William Rivers Pitt, August 29th. I'm sorry, August 28th. That was yesterday. He lied about testing again. He lied about the China travel ban again. He lied about the pandemic dead again. He lied about supporting black people again. He lied about protecting coverage for pre-existing conditions again. He lied about Joe Biden and Barack Obama again and again. He lied about petroleum, the police, the military, the border wall, immigration in general, NATO, the economy, veterans. For more than an hour in the hot COVID night of Washington, D.C., Donald Trump breathed in oxygen and exhaled fiction. As far as we know, he might have exhaled COVID along with the fiction. The man was a blacksmith's bellows of shaded falsehoods and outright lies, again, as he broke the law on the White House lawn Thursday night. With his death cult of cheering, sweaty, unmasked, shoulder-to-shoulder devotees arrayed before him, Trump painted a bleak portrait of the nation in chaotic hues of his own failed stewardship, all blood red, Klansman white, and cop blue, except none of it was his fault, of course. There were about 1,500 people packed into that fascist square of time. And if COVID was in the audience with them, there will be a measurable body count from the affair before the children find out there can be no Halloween. Sorry, sweetie, but the President of the United States made the virus bad again. We can't trick or treat this year. COVID, the ongoing national racial justice uprising, vivid environmental damage, and economic ruin are the legacy of Trump's first term as president. But according to his people, the economy is doing wonderfully. There is no climate disruption. Black Lives Matter protesters are harming society, and COVID is over. That last viciously self-serving lie on the heels of the super spreader festival at the White House comes with a particularly damaging twist of the dagger. CNN's Jim Acosta spoke with a senior White House official about the flagrantly dangerous lack of COVID protections on display during Trump's nomination acceptance speech. According to Acosta, the White House official, quote, brushed off those concerns about the lack of social distancing at the president's speech tonight, saying, and quote, and get this quote might blow you away. Quote, everybody is going to catch this eventually. Those are the words coming from a senior White House official about the concerns being raised about this being a possible super spreader event tonight, unquote. It is the mass consensus of COVID science that allowing the virus to burn unchecked through the populace will cause hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of deaths. And as I said earlier, we are already over 186,855. We are approaching 187,000. And that, of course, does not count those deaths due to COVID that were not counted, as due to COVID. The estimates of the New York Times would suggest that those deaths are probably, if you include them in the total, that the death total would now already be up to 220,000. Going on with the article, yet this appears to be the stated policy of the Trump administration as they strive for a second opportunity to grind the nation further into the dust. According to a Friday report in the Charlotte Observer, 2 attendees and 2 support staffers for the convention in that city have been diagnosed with COVID-19. The wolf is loose again. to the surprise of nobody who has been paying the slightest bit of attention to these last 7 months. One day before his nomination acceptance speech, Trump was asked by the New York Times to lay out his agenda for that second term. He said, quote, I think it would be I think we'd have a very, very solid, we would continue what we're doing, we'd solidify what we've done, and we have other things on our plate we want to get done, unquote, he answered. But let him die. That is the agenda, on the streets and in the hospitals. And not even a slice of cake as a parting gift. But Jacob Blake, paralyzed perhaps for life by the 7 bullets pumped into his fleeing back by Kenosha police, spent Thursday handcuffed to his hospital bed. Meanwhile, hidden in plain sight, racism, white supremacy, and far-right militancy in law enforcement. The Brennan Center's report on the Blue Lives that spent the last 4 days getting a tongue bath at Trump's convention landed a few hours before Trump's acceptance speech. The report warns the harms that armed law enforcement officers affiliated with violent white supremacist and anti-government militia groups can inflict on American society could hardly be overstated. Yet despite the FBI's acknowledgement of the links between law enforcement and these suspected terrorist groups, the Justice Department has no national strategy designed to identify white supremacist police officers or to protect the safety and civil rights of the communities they patrol. But let them die. No, let's resist. All day today, thousands of people will gather, of course, have gathered now, in Washington, D.C. to note the 57th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s, quote, I have a dream, unquote, speech. The estimated crowd size was double what it is now. But COVID concerns have severely, improperly limited attendance by people from areas deemed, quote, hotspots, unquote. Thermometer check-in stations will be widely available. Masks will be required, and social distancing will be diligently practiced. The families of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Gardner, and Jacob Blake will join Reverend Al Sharpton and Martin Luther King III on Friday at the Commitment March. Get your knees off our necks, unquote, reports CBS News. Quote, the march, organized by the National Action Network, calls for racial justice and police reform. Sharpton first announced plans for the march but during a memorial service for George Floyd, the 46-year-old father who died at the hands of the police in Minneapolis in May, unquote. The Republican National Convention is over. The long quest for justice, freedom, accountability, and hope has only just begun. Tell a friend. And that was the latest contribution of William Rivers Pitt to our ongoing struggle. Of course, as far as the White House is concerned, it's always property over people, specifically Donald Trump's property, Donald Trump's potential for gain, and Donald Trump's personal profits that he's been able to get out of the presidency of the United States by violating the Constitution every single day he has been in office. Every single damn day he has violated the emoluments clauses of the Constitution with impunity. Thank you, Nancy Pelosi. Thank you, Mitch McConnell. So, let us go to the next article to share. This appeared on August 25th. The headline was underwhelming and inadequate. Green groups slam new Senate Democrats, unquote, climate report. I'm sorry, that wasn't Kate, unquote. There was an apostrophe. I think there should have been another S there. But anyway, that's the headline. And the subheadline says, the Green New Deal is mentioned only once in the 263-page report. In the footnotes, this is written by Brett Wilkins, who's another staff writer for Common Dreams. Okay, a climate action report released Tuesday by Senate Democrats drew disappointed reactions from green groups and progressive campaigners who say it does not do nearly enough to combat, excuse me a second, I think I detected a change in my sound somewhere. Let me...
You want on or off, Joey?
On. Nope, I guess it should still be all right. The Climate Action Report released on Tuesday by Senate Democrats drew disappointed reactions from green groups and the progressive campaigners who say it does not do nearly enough to combat the potentially existential threat of catastrophic global heating caused by human activity. The report, titled The Case for Climate Action, Building a Clean Economy for the American People, and the PDF is linked to there, was authored by 10 Democratic senators, including Edward J. Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, who, along with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, introduced the Green New Deal resolution in Congress last year. However, the 263-page plan mentions the Green New Deal only once as a footnote on page 228. Now, why was that the case? Well, let's see what we have here. Am I still sharing this? Let me see. Oh, yeah. It looks like I'm sharing that. So you might as well have a look at the report. I just wanted to check on who wrote it. So Brian Schatz from Hawaii, who's a fairly green guy, and I believe is a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, was the chair. But then we also had some more conventional Democrats. Now, I should say Jeff Merkley of Oregon is also a co-sponsor, of the Green New Deal resolution, and it is a extremely green type Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, though, has lately turned into a fiscal hawk. And Michael F. Bennett, of Colorado, is another fiscal hawk. Tammy Baldwin is, shall we say, not that strong on the Green New Deal, more an establishment sort of Democrat. Martin Heinrich is a little more green. Ed Markey, of course, is the co-sponsor of the Green New Deal in the Senate, the leading co-sponsor, in the Senate. And then we come to Tammy Duckworth and Catherine Cortez Masto, Nevada. Tina Smith, of Minnesota. All of them centrist establishment people who worry about faux fiscal responsibility. So those are the authors. Those are the authors, of the report. So obviously the report could not go very aggressively on the Green New Deal because no more than 1, 2, 3, 4 people were actually Green New Deal people. So they had to craft some compromise that would be acceptable. That would be acceptable, to everyone. So let me go back once more. Here's a picture unfurling the Green New Deal sign in front of the Capitol. These are Sunrise Movement people. This was during the D.C. climate strike on September 20th, 2019. So you can take the link from this article and read the full report, if you like. In March 2019, Chuck Schumer launched the Senate Democrats' Special Committee on the Climate Crisis to study the impact of climate change and devise a strategy to mitigate its damage. This report is the result of dozens of hearings and closed-door meetings. Calls on the government to spend over $400 billion annually, with the goal of eliminating greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. It also aims to create at least 10 million new U.S. jobs in clean energy, manufacturing, research, and development, while reforming lobbying laws to curtail the outside influence of the fossil fuel industry. According to the report, the price tag of the plan is equal to about 2% of U.S. gross domestic product. It claims that at least 40% of the benefits from these investments will help communities of color and low-income, deindustrialized, and disadvantaged communities, unquote. I want to remark, at this point, that the price tag of the plan is equal to about 2% of U.S. gross domestic product. They're spending 2% of GDP on what has been labeled by many, rightly, as an existential crisis for humankind. Of course, an existential crisis for the United States. Only 2% of U.S. GDP. What did we spend during World War II? What did we spend on the military? And on industry devoted to World War II during World War II? What was the percent of U.S. gross domestic product that was devoted to World War II during that existential crisis? I can't give you the precise answer because I haven't looked it up. But I am pretty certain that it was on the order of 40 to 50% of GDP. 40 to 50% of GDP to meet that existential crisis. Let me even put the question. Let us put the question. What percent of GDP devoted to World War II? This is the kind of information that might be picked up easily by Google. Let's see if they have that exact figure. Defense spending alone rose from 1.4% of GDP in 1940 to over 37% in 1945. Studies of the effect of war spending tend to find relatively small multipliers for economic activity. Well, that goes into some other issues. Okay, but there you have it on defense spending alone. We are talking about 37%. That doesn't touch other parts, okay, of GDP. The military had the first claim on all resources. Over 36% of estimated GDP was devoted to the production of war goods that would be destroyed, left behind, or mothballed. There was no production, okay, of automobiles for civilian use. Also, little civilian housing and most consumer durable goods. The military also had first claim on the materials for clothing, food, and other factors. This led to rationing of meat, fuel, gasoline, and so on. So I don't have an exact figure for how much of GDP was actually due to the war effort in general. All we have here, okay, is an estimate for defense spending. But since that was 37%, I'm fairly certain that my estimate here was not too far off. So, when we were fighting a war, we could manage that percent of GDP in order to fight it, okay, and to win. Now we have a true existential crisis on our hands, the climate crisis. And all we can find to spend on the climate crisis, according to the proposal of this committee in the Senate, is a plan equal to about 2% of U.S. gross domestic product. These people are nuts. They've taken leave of their senses. Going on. It claims, well, that is the report, that at least 40% of the benefits from these investments will, quote, help communities of color and low income, deindustrialized, and disadvantaged communities. Unquote again. We have the opportunity to build more and better jobs for the American people, jobs that will help re-stimulate the economy and aid in our transition to clean energy, unquote. Senator Schumer said to reporters on Tuesday, quote, when Democrats retake the majority in the Senate, we will unify to move swiftly on legislation to tackle the climate crisis. And he added, quote again, passing climate legislation will be a top priority for Senate Democrats and me, unquote. However, climate activists, maybe you can count me a climate activist, blasted the report as woefully inadequate to deal with what is arguably the greatest threat facing humanity today. Mitch Jones, Director of Policy for Food and Water Action, said in a statement the report, quote, completes a trifecta of underwhelming and inadequate proposals from Democratic leadership, unquote, adding that the plan, quote again, relies on false solutions designed to placate the oil and gas the lobby, unquote. There again, both in the scale of the plan that's in the report and also in the false solutions they speak of. We see the priority of property over people. Quote, further, it fails to address the vital need to end the extraction, processing, and burning of fossil fuels, and instead sees a future for fossil fuels tied to the false promise of carbon capture, unquote. Said Jones. And quote again, it even fails to include a call to ban new fossil fuel extraction on public lands, which was a position that was endorsed by virtually all candidates in the Democratic presidential primary, unquote. So even though it was endorsed by virtually all candidates in the Democratic presidential primary, this group of authors, who included a number of candidates in the presidential primary, at least a couple that I recall, would not take a position endorsed by those candidates, including, presumably, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Brett Hartle, Director of Government Affairs at the Center for Biological Diversity, a Tucson, Arizona-based nonprofit, but dedicated to protecting endangered species, called the Democrats' plan, quote, weak, unquote. Quote, by ignoring fossil fuel extraction and the urgent need to slash planet-warming emissions 50% by 2030, Senate Democrats have utterly failed to make the case for climate action, unquote. Hartle said in an email to Common Dreams, and quote again, if these weak recommendations are turned into law, future generations will know that the desire to please a few special interest polluters left them with a devastated planet. Well, first, that's if there are any future generations. And second, that is certainly placing the interests of property over the interests of the people. Quote, we need strong action now to curb drilling and fracking and move quickly toward cleaner forms forms of energy, unquote, Hartle added. And quote, strong action now, unquote, at least on paper, is being promised in Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's recently unveiled climate plan, which proposes $2 billion be spent over the next 4 years boosting clean energy in the transportation, power, and building sectors as part of an ambitious recovery plan. $2 trillion over the next 4 years, folks, amounts to $500 million per year. Okay, let's assume that our economy has a GDP right now, or would have, if not for COVID, of $22 trillion. Then $500 billion a year is how much? Well, 2.2 trillion is 10%. 220 billion is 1%. So what? 2.5% of our GDP is what is being proposed by Joe Biden? Is that strong action now? Bernie Sanders' plan, by contrast, was proposing an average of $1.6 trillion per year. Now that's more like it. But it's still not serious compared to what we did in World War II in order to meet with a crisis that was felt to be an existential one at that time. What is wrong with us? I guess I know. We keep putting property, the interests of property, the current state of property, the current structure of our lives in reference to property. We put that above our lives themselves, the lives of the American people. The proposal by the former vice president who served in an administration that promoted fracking at home and abroad and was itself assailed for not doing enough in the face of the growing climate threat has drawn praise from some activists and climate-minded political leaders. I think that those activists and those leaders, I don't think their head is screwed on straight. They're not correlating the budgetary amounts that are mentioned at all with the seriousness of the climate effort. Yes, this report is inferior to Biden's program, but Biden's program and Biden's plan is not visionary. It pales before what Bernie Sanders campaigned on and what is in Bernie's plan. It is far from visionary. Inslee, who was during the campaign, presidential campaign, he was trying to come off as Mr. Climate, said, quote, "This is no status quo plan," unquote. And quote again, "It is comprehensive. This is not some sort of, let me just throw a bone to those who care about climate change," unquote. I think it's much worse than that, because it isn't enough of a bone. In a way, Bernie was throwing us a bone. This is 1/10 of a bone. Biden's plan stands in stark contrast with the policies of the Trump administration, which earlier this month finalized plans to open the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, one of the largest intact, unspoiled wildernesses on the planet, and home to indigenous peoples who rely upon the healthy ecosystem for their physical and spiritual survival. It wants to open that to oil and gas development. During Donald Trump's tenure, the United States has become the world's largest crude oil producer, a position it has not held since 1973. We are producing more crude oil here than Saudi Arabia, more crude oil here than Venezuela, more crude oil here than anywhere else in the world. We are the biggest contributor to fossil fuel pollution on the planet. And we refuse to get off the addiction, even when getting off it is essential for our survival. Once again, putting property ahead of people. Let me take a look at your various comments now. Seems like a quiet night. There must be a lot of other things going on. Stephanie says, hey, Dr. Joe. Susan says hello. Dale says good evening, all. Susan says the news is so depressing. Yes, but Susan, you're right to keep fighting. You're canvassing, and that's great. And Kay says, hi, Evelina. Evelina says, hey, Kay. Deborah says, I'm late. Estoy tarde en español. Excuse my Spanish, the pronunciation. It's just right. Steve Gonzo says, so Bonnie raises a question. But do we believe that our world can be destroyed in 10 to 12 years? The supplies of fish are already in trouble. Yes, they are. I'm not sure it can happen in 10 to 12 years, but I know if we don't get things under control over the next 10 years, we will sustain severe damage, maybe enough to destroy our civilization soon thereafter, maybe in the coming 20 to 25 years. Steve Gonzo says, there are massive marches in London's surrounding area protesting COVID response and the corruption. And well, there might be, Steve. Well, there might be. We cannot forget that even though things have been getting better in the UK lately, the fact of the matter still is that 611 deaths per million is the deaths per million rate in the UK, discounting for two very small nations. They are number 4 in the world in that dreadful statistic. Only Spain, okay, in Belgium, I guess I missed something I should have pointed out. So Peru, that has been going crazy with deaths, okay, of late, is now at 866 fatalities per million. they have now surpassed by Belgium, which for a very, very long time was number 2 in the world, and discounting San Marino was actually number 1 in the world. Now, number 1, discounting San Marino, is Peru, a South American country where COVID has gone wild. Another right-wing regime producing 866 fatalities per capita, surpassing Belgium. Spain is down at 620, and the UK at 611. So Spain is 3rd in the world, discounting those very small nations, and the UK is 4th. Italy is 5th. And Brazil and Chile and ourselves are rapidly closing in, okay, on Italy. It won't be long. It won't be long. Anyway, big protests in Berlin, too, protesting masks and social distancing. Yes, the Germans are becoming increasingly stupid about this. They have done better than a lot, okay, of other nations. If they're protesting masks and social distancing, they're asking for it. It can go wild in Germany. It can go wild there. And Merkel has been right in holding them in all along. She'll still continue to hold them in. Deborah Wilson said, I shared to as many appropriate groups as they would allow. Thank you, Deborah. And, but Dominique Morgan says hello. Hi, Dominique, and welcome to the In-Depth Show. Evelina says, I saw that parody they put on, Serious Consequences for the Gullible. Did you hear the speakers? What a spoof, each one of them. No, I did not. Sorry, didn't hear the parody. Didn't see the parody. And Amber, HK Grigo, says, hello, my friends. Hi, Amber. How you doing? Evelina says, oh, and by the way, credit to Amber tonight. She did the promo for us. So special thanks are due to Amber for tonight's promo. Evelina says, no masks or social distancing in London protest. Oh, my God. So, people in the UK are not satisfied with 611 deaths per million. They want to start competing with us again. I mean, people are going crazy, folks. Deborah says, okay, I got some more shares in. Thank you, Deborah. Evelina says, I saw that. Stephanie says, finally done sharing. Stephanie says, hey, Amber. Stephanie says, Amber HK Grigo, I saw your latest video. I approved it for my group. Now I cannot find it. Can you send it again to me? And Stephanie says, NVM, I found it. Stephanie says, I fear for our children having to go back to school. Me too. Fortunately, here in Loudoun County, people are being rational and the kids are getting online learning. As far as I know, none of them have had to physically go back to school. Evelyn says, they're only sending the kids back to school so parents could go back to work. And I hate to say it, but that might be safer for the parents, depending on where they go to work, of course. There are a lot of parents who can work online also, so the whole family can work online. Evelina says there's pressure to go back to work. I know, putting property over people, again. Evelina says, how do you explain the risks these people at the GOP are taking? Surely they know better. How do I explain the risks? No, they don't know better. They believe the malarkey. to use a favorite term of Joe Biden's. They believe the malarkey. They believe the lies. Why would you question that they believe the lies? If they don't believe the lies, if they believe the lies are lies, how could they look themselves in the mirror in the morning?
They don't recognize they've been brainwashed.
But knowing that Trump lies to them every single damn day, and they take it.
They don't realize they've been brainwashed.
And Bonnie says they don't realize they've been brainwashed. Kay says, Evelina Pond, same as in UK and Berlin, idiots. And Steve says, re 455 Facebook complaints. To put that number into perspective, it made up 66% of all event reports that day. Unquote. The next highest event for the day had been flagged 18 times by users compared to the 455 times of the Kenosha Guard event. Quote, at what point do we take responsibility for enabling hate-filled bile to spread across our services, wrote one employee. Quote, anti-Semitism, conspiracy, and white supremacy reeks across our services, unquote. And Aaron Lundquist says, Trump president lying asshole. Evelina says, they're mostly middle-aged folk, too. Kay says, yep, young people are smarter than that, Evelina. Well, just remember the 17-year-old who shot people in Kenosha. Kay says, it was a great turnout for that demonstration in D.C. I heard about 130,000 people there. That's not a great turnout. There were much larger turnouts during the 1960s. We need to have, that turnout should have been 10 times the 130,000 people there, Kay.
We have a million-man march.
Yeah, there was a million-man march, Kay, at one point. That wasn't in the 60s, so that's far more recent. Evelina says, I don't know, Kay. On the whole, young people tend to take more risks. Yes, they do. Dolores says, hi, all shared. Thank you, Dolores. And Kay says, depends on how young they are. Yes, college kids and high school kids, but most of the older young people are smarter, Evelina. Kay says, almost everyone is a young person to me because I'm old, laugh out loud. Evelina says, Kay, it's relative. Kay says, don't forget, tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is the People's Convention put on by Movement for a People's Party. Should be a good one. We'll be on Facebook and YouTube too. Great. Steve says, oh, Snapple. I didn't realize they were protesting masks. It didn't cross my mind that there may be that many COVIDiots. Kay says, Bernie had a couple town halls in Texas and Colorado today, but telling people that if Biden wins, it will take all of us in groups to still push them to the left. Yes, I didn't see the Colorado town hall yet, but I saw the Texas town hall, which I thought was very hopeful, okay, and very good. But what got me about the town hall was the fulsome amounts of praise that Beto laid on Bernie Sanders.
That was amazing.
On Bernie Sanders. I mean, why didn't Beto run as a Sanders Democrat? Even if he was going to run in competition with Bernie, he still should have run as a Sanders Democrat. I mean, he talked like a Sanders Democrat today. Maybe he plans to run in 2024 as a Sanders Democrat. Who knows? I mean, man, it sounded like Bernie was his total inspiration.
And he won't have to stand on a table.
No, he's still going to have to stand on a table and go and do the wingspan thing. He should have been a basketball player. He has the longest arm since Phil Jackson. Thanks for the reminder, Kay. I wasn't sure what time it was tomorrow. I was going to have to look it up. 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That means it's 1 p.m. I think it's in, I forget where it is, whether it's in Wisconsin, okay, or Minnesota, or whether it's entirely online. COVID, it's... Anyway, Bernie's town halls. I haven't had a chance to see the Colorado town hall. Was Michael Bennett in that Colorado town hall? Was he fulsomely praising Bernie Sanders for all the people he woke up for the party? Jesus. Okay, says Josh Fox, the anti-fracking activist, says Biden can be pushed left with enough pressure. Well, that's what Michael Moore thinks also. I hope to God they're right. Steve Gonzo says, funny bone. And Kay says, follow Michael E. Mann, climate scientist. He's good. Been following him for years. He's wonderful. I've been following him for years, too. Steve says, Phoenix, 50 days, 110-degree heat. Wow. Wow. Kay says, so glad to put it out there, Steve. And Steve Gonzo says, I was pleasantly relieved on my month-and-a-half run for supplies. 95%, but I'm masked up. That was good. You mean 95% of the people, okay, were wearing masks, or you were wearing an N95 mask? What about it, Steve? Alvaro Mena says, sorry, so late, just now got the phone. Hi, Alvaro. Was Beto standing on something? No, he seemed to be sitting down. He seemed quite sane and very eloquent. Alvaro says, the Michael Bennett, bad choice. I don't know if Michael Bennett was on the Colorado Town Hall. I didn't happen to see it. Did anybody see the Colorado Town Hall? Okay, I've run out of comments for now. Stephanie says, good night, everyone. Good show tonight, Dr. Joe. But thank you, Stephanie. Have a very good night.
Thank you for your work.
And thank you very much for your sharing. And thank you for being part of our discussion. Cases, I saw it and don't think Bennett was on it. Thank God. I wouldn't like to have to hear Bennett fulsomely praising Bernie. I wouldn't want to hear Hickenlooper fulsomely praising Bernie either. Now, was Hickenlooper on it, by the way? He's the Dems' wonderful choice for the Senate against Cory Gardner. They blew off a chance to get a really great senator in, specifically Romanoff, Andrew Romanoff. He would have been great. Errol says, well, it's great to see Mello, Merlot, Joe tonight anyway. Well, thank you, but I was hoping to see the Incredible Hulk tonight. And Steve Gonzo says, yeah, UDF grocery, rural King Bank, only liquor store lady without a mask. I think she has a death wish, laugh out loud. Maybe she thinks the alcohol protects her. Kay says, thank you all. I need these discussions. Avril says, it's correction. Yes, Avril, got a lot of corrections. Kay says, no big names are on it. They were mostly progressive candidates. Well, that is good. That is good. We need support, okay, for progressive candidates. Were there any AOC types who were running in Colorado? Because I can't recall any at this point. The only AOC type who was running, okay, was Andrew Romanoff, who was running for the Senate. But I don't remember any Congress people there. who were AOC types. But the lady running, what's her name? I think her name is Julie Oliver. Is that it? In Texas? Anyway, she's terrific. Certainly when it comes to Medicare for all, she's committed, totally committed. She's running in the Austin area. Her district, though, encompasses a lot of rural areas around there, too. So she'll have a tough time winning. She won the primary. Now she has to beat the Republican. And the Republican's a low-down skunk with a lot of money. Bonnie's sitting here laughing because I called the Republican a low-down skunk.
You know, we are constantly getting polls about how we feel about things.
Yes.
What we want.
Oh, yes. I meant to give some advice about that.
We should start.
When you get these polls, okay, in your emails, when you respond to these polls, don't give them any information they want. They want to find out how many progressives are likely to vote for Joe Biden. Don't give them that information. They need to be in fear that we will vote third party or that we will vote for Donald Trump in the end. Even in the swing states, they need to be in fear. Keep them in fear. When you get these polls from what are obviously establishment, the Democratic, the front groups, keep them in fear. That's all I got to say. Avril says, I heard Donald Trump stumbled and bumbled around the podium in New Hampshire. I don't know. I didn't see that. Did he really stumble and bumble? And Dolores says, thank you and good night all. Thank you, Dolores. Thank you for all your efforts. Anything else? Okay, so I will see you again on Tuesday night with a live stream. I will have some short takes out before Tuesday night. I hope to have at least 2 new short takes for you, maybe even 3 before then, if the creeks don't rise. But anyway, I will see you for my next live stream on Tuesday night. And Steve Gonzo says vitamin B seems to alleviate most severe coronavirus cases. Steve, where did you hear this? We have been hearing that it's vitamin D3 that is the most effective against the coronavirus. First of all, as a preventative before coronavirus. Second, okay, if you do get it, it seems to prevent the cases from getting too serious. Avril says, I don't give them any info online either. Kay says, good night all. Good night, Kay. Have a great night. Anybody else? Any other questions? If not, Avril says, okay, hope to see you on time on Tuesday. Hope to see you on time on Tuesday too, Carbon. Have a great rest of the weekend. I'm afraid tomorrow I'm going to be spending some time doing some taxes, which I finally decided to file before the deadline. Anyway, good night. And I'm going to end the broadcast. Good night, Susan. Thanks for coming.